At 82, I thought moving into a nursing home would give me comfort, safety, and peace of mind. My family promised I'd be cared for, and I believed them. But what I discovered after I moved in shocked me. Life there was nothing like I imagined. Today, I want to share the 6 hard truths no one warned me about. If you or someone you love is thinking about a nursing home, you need to hear this before making a decision you can't take back. Regret 1: Losing my independence. The first and hardest regret I felt after moving into a nursing home was the painful loss of independence, something I had taken for granted my whole life until it was gone. At home, I had a rhythm to my days that was entirely my own. I woke up when my body told me it was time, not when an alarm or a schedule demanded it. If I felt like having breakfast early, I did. If I wasn't hungry until later, I waited. I could decide to sit quietly with my favorite book in the chair I had chosen, or I could step outside for a walk whenever the mood struck me. Even small choices, like deciding what to cook, what clothes to wear, or how to spend an afternoon, gave me a sense of control and identity. But in the nursing home, I realized almost immediately that those small freedoms, the very things that made life feel personal and mine, were replaced with routines that belonged to someone else. Breakfast was served at a certain time, and if I wasn't hungry, it didn't matter. That was the schedule. Lights were turned out at night whether or not I was ready for bed. If I wanted to step outside for some fresh air, I had to ask permission, and often I would be told to wait until staff had time to escort me. Even what I wore sometimes depended on convenience rather than preference, and meals weren't about what I felt like eating but what was being served to everyone that day. At first, I resisted. I told myself it didn't matter, that I could adjust, that these were just small inconveniences. But little by little, I noticed how much those small decisions had actually shaped my sense of self. They weren't just routines, they were pieces of my independence, and without them, my days started to feel less like my own and more like I was living on someone else's terms. I'll never forget one morning during my first week there. I woke up, stretched, and instinctively reached for the book I had been reading at home. But when I looked around the room, I was struck by the cold reality: this wasn't my home. The walls were plain, the bed wasn't mine, and the familiar comforts I had spent years collecting were nowhere to be found. Instead of my cherished chair and bookshelves, there was a sterile space that felt temporary yet permanent at the same time. That moment broke something inside me. The realization hit me that once you give up independence, it's nearly impossible to take it back. You adapt because you have no choice, you stop questioning when meals are served, you stop insisting on your own way, and soon you find yourself blending into the system. But in that process of adapting, you slowly lose yourself. That, more than anything, was the greatest shock of nursing home life: not the room, not the food, not the people, but the quiet disappearance of my freedom to live life on my own terms. Regret 2: Feeling forgotten. The second regret that weighs heavily on me is the feeling of being forgotten, a pain I never truly understood until I experienced it for myself. When I first moved into the nursing home, my family promised they would visit often, and in the beginning, they did. My daughter would come by once a week, sometimes bringing little treats from home or simply sitting with me to talk. My grandchildren would visit on weekends, their laughter filling the room and making the sterile walls feel a little warmer. For a while, those visits reminded me that I was still connected to the world outside, still part of my family's story. But as the months went by, life for them grew busy in ways I could not keep up with. Visits that were once regular became less frequent, then occasional, and eventually rare. Phone calls replaced visits, and then even those started coming less often. My daughter would say, "I'll call tomorrow, Dad," and tomorrow would stretch into next week. My grandchildren, once so eager to come by, grew wrapped up in school, work, and their own lives, and I found myself waiting by the window or sitting in the common room, watching other residents stare at the door with the same quiet hope that today might be the day someone remembered them. Holidays were the hardest. Promises of family gatherings would suddenly turn into last-minute calls saying, "Sorry, we couldn't make it." I told myself they still loved me, and I know they did, but love doesn't always erase loneliness. What hurt the most wasn't that they didn't care, but that life simply moved on without me, and because I was no longer around every day, it became easy to forget that I still needed them. I remember one evening sitting alone in my room, phone in hand, debating whether to call my son. I didn't want to sound needy, didn't want to be a burden or remind him of my loneliness. So, I put the phone down and sat quietly, feeling the weight of being invisible. That moment made me realize something important. It's not just the walls of the nursing home that separate you from the world, it's time and distance, and those gaps grow wider the longer you stay. Loneliness doesn't come loudly, it settles in like a shadow, creeping slowly until you realize it's everywhere. And once it takes hold, it changes you. You stop asking for visits, you stop reminding people, and you begin to shrink inside yourself. If you are thinking about moving into a nursing home, ask yourself if you're ready for that kind of silence, because no matter how much your family loves you, once you are out of sight, you can easily become out of mind. And if you're watching this right now and you're still with me, please comment number 2 below so I know I'm not forgotten here either. Regret 3, losing my sense of purpose. Another deep regret I carry about moving into a nursing home is losing my sense of purpose, something I didn't realize was so important until it was gone. At home, even the smallest responsibilities gave me direction each day. I woke up knowing there were things to do, even if they were simple: watering the plants by the window, brewing a fresh pot of tea in the morning, straightening up the living room, or tinkering with a loose handle or a squeaky hinge that needed fixing. These little tasks might have seemed unimportant to anyone else, but they gave me structure, ownership, and the quiet satisfaction of taking care of my own world. They reminded me that I still had abilities, that I was still needed in some way, even if just by the plants that leaned toward the sunlight or the house that stayed in order because of my hands. But when I moved into the nursing home, all of that disappeared almost overnight. Meals were prepared for me, laundry was done by someone else, cleaning was no longer my responsibility, and the space around me didn't even belong to me to care for. At first, I told myself it might feel like a relief: no more chores, no more duties, just time to relax. But what I didn't anticipate was the emptiness that came with it. They stretched longer and longer with nothing meaningful to fill them, and I began to feel like time itself was slipping through my fingers. I saw the same thing happen to others around me. Men and women who had once been full of energy and skill now spent hours staring blankly at the television or napping, not out of tiredness, but out of boredom. I remember a man named George, who had been a carpenter his entire life. His hands had built furniture, repaired homes, and carried decades of craftsmanship. At home, he always had a project waiting for him in his garage, but here there were no tools, no wood, no purpose for his steady hands. Slowly, I watched him sink into silence, his once strong and capable hands lying idle in his lap. One day he told me, with sadness in his eyes, "I feel useless." And I knew exactly what he meant, because I felt it too. Purpose is not something that can be replaced by television shows, organized activities, or endless naps. Purpose comes from knowing that something or someone relies on you, that your actions still matter in some way. Without that, you begin to fade, not just physically, but in spirit. If you are considering a nursing home, I urge you to ask yourself, so what will keep you feeling needed? What will give your days meaning when the daily chores and projects you've always done are no longer yours to do? Because without purpose, life doesn't just become quiet, it becomes empty. Regret 4, decline came faster than I thought. One of the most painful realizations I had after moving into the nursing home was just how quickly my health started to decline once I stopped doing the small daily tasks that used to keep me active. Before, in my own home, I didn't think much about how much exercise I was actually getting. Cooking a meal meant standing on my feet, moving around the kitchen, reaching for pots and pans. Walking through the grocery store, even if slowly, kept my legs steady and strong. Carrying a bag of groceries, sweeping the floor, bending to pick up something, or simply walking from one room to another gave me more movement than I realized. These little habits were exercise in disguise, and they kept my muscles working and my body alive. But once I moved into the nursing home, all of that vanished. Meals were prepared for me and brought on trays. Cleaning was done by staff. If I needed anything, I could press a button and someone would come to help. At first, it felt convenient, almost like a luxury to have so much taken care of. But convenience has a cost, and I learned that cost was my strength. Within weeks, I noticed I wasn't moving as much, and my legs began to feel stiffer. Sitting for long stretches made it harder to stand. I began needing more effort just to do simple things, like rising from a chair or walking down the hall. And I wasn't the only one. I watched neighbors who came in walking steady with no support slowly become dependent on walkers, then wheelchairs, all within a matter of months. People who once prided themselves on independence now needed help with things they had managed easily at home. I'll never forget one woman named Alice. She was 81 when she arrived, lively and determined to keep her freedom. Every morning, she would walk laps around the facility, insisting she wasn't going to let age slow her down. But as time passed, her walks grew shorter, then less frequent. Soon she was using a walker, and eventually she was in a wheelchair full-time. One day, with sadness in her eyes, she told me, "I feel like I aged 10 years in just a few months." Her words echoed what I felt myself, a steep, unexpected decline. The truth is, the easier life is made for you, the less your body gets to practice being strong, and once you stop using your body, you start losing it faster than you ever thought possible. If I had known, I would have fought harder to keep moving, to stretch, to walk, to do anything that kept my muscles alive. So if you're considering a nursing home, or even just a place where most things are done for you, ask yourself, how will you make sure to keep moving? Because without movement, your health can decline far faster than you ever imagined. And if this rings true to you, let me know you're still here by commenting number 4 below. Regret 5. Losing privacy and dignity. One of the hardest parts about moving into a nursing home was realizing just how much of my privacy and dignity slipped away, little by little, in ways I never fully expected. At home, privacy was something I took for granted. I could shut a door, sit in silence, or carry out my daily routines the way I liked, without interruption. But inside the home, that sense of personal space became rare. Staff walked into my room for checks, sometimes without knocking, because their job required it. Scheduled routines meant I had to be awake, dressed, or ready to eat at times that weren't always my choice, and the independence of deciding when to start or end my day was gone. For some, privacy is further reduced when you have to share a room with someone you didn't choose, a stranger with their own habits, noises, and moods. Suddenly the most personal parts of your life, from sleeping to conversations on the phone, aren't truly yours anymore. And then there's the loss that cuts the deepest, needing help with the most basic things. Dressing myself, bathing, or going to the bathroom, things I had managed on my own for decades, suddenly required assistance. Having someone help you in those moments, even with kindness and professionalism, feels humbling in a way that's difficult to describe. It's not about shame in needing help, but about the slow erosion of dignity when the things that once gave you self-respect are no longer yours to manage. Small losses pile up every day. The clothes I wanted to wear were sometimes replaced with what was easier to wash. The food I wished for wasn't always on the menu. Even deciding when I wanted a quiet moment wasn't always possible when the schedule of the building dictated everything. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was part of the adjustment, but over time the weight of not being in charge of my own life became heavy. I watched others go through the same, strong men and women who once ran households, raised families, and made important decisions, now having someone else choose what time they bathed or when they got to rest. Dignity doesn't always disappear in one big moment, it's in the small, daily reminders that you are no longer fully in control. And when those moments add up, it can feel like your identity is slowly slipping away. If there is one thing I wish people knew before making this choice, it's to think about how important privacy and dignity are to you, and how you will protect them, even in small ways, when living in a place where so much is shared and scheduled. Because once you lose those freedoms, it's very hard to get them back, and they are more precious than most people realize. Regret 6. It's harder to leave than you think. When I first moved into the nursing home, I told myself it was just a trial, something temporary, a chance to see if it would work for me, and if not, I could always leave and go back to my old life. But what I didn't realize was how much harder it is to leave than it is to come in. At the start, everything felt like an experiment. I thought, if it doesn't feel right, I'll just move back home. What I hadn't thought through were all the little changes that happen quickly, quietly, and often without warning, that make leaving feel almost impossible. For one, your home doesn't wait forever. Sometimes children or family members clear out rooms, sell furniture, or repurpose the space because they assume you won't be back. Belongings that gave you comfort and familiarity, your chair, your books, your favorite blanket, slowly disappear, and going back doesn't feel like going home anymore because the home itself has changed. Then there's the money side of it. Nursing homes are expensive, and once savings start being spent, the financial flexibility to set up a home again shrinks. For many, the funds that once could have supported independence are used up quickly on care costs, and starting fresh becomes financially out of reach. And then there's the hardest part, your body changes faster than you expect. The strength you thought you had begins to slip. After months of not cooking, cleaning, or doing the little chores that kept you moving, you suddenly realize you can't manage the same routines at home anymore. The stairs feel steeper, the kitchen feels overwhelming, and the idea of being alone becomes scary. Even if your heart longs to return, your body may no longer cooperate. I saw this happen to others too. Many of my neighbors came in with the same plan, I just stay for a little while, then go back. But slowly, one by one, they realized leaving wasn't simple. One man I knew, Robert, used to say he was just there while his hip healed. But as months went by, his home was rented out, his car was sold, and his strength declined. By the time he was ready, there was nothing to go back to. He admitted one day, with tears in his eyes, I never meant for this to be forever, but now I'm stuck. That's the reality many don't talk about. Once you enter the system, the finances, your health, and even family worries about your safety can all quietly close the door to leaving. So my advice is simple, before you move in, ask yourself if this choice is truly reversible, or if it might end up being permanent. Because once you step through that door, coming back out is far more difficult than most people realize. And if this opened your eyes, please comment number 6 below so I know you're still with me. If you've connected with what I shared today, I'd love for you to join our little community by subscribing. Every story here is about learning, growing, and supporting one another as we navigate the later chapters of life. Your presence truly matters. When you subscribe, you're not just following a channel, you're joining a family of people who care, who listen, and who understand. So hit that subscribe button and let's walk this journey together, because none of us should have to go through it alone.